And welcome to the Ango Podcast with Brian, Bill, and Mike. To jump off of our top 10 best modern fantasies, we're going to continue discussion with particular cases. Ango.
So I've been reading Stormfront, the first in the Dresden Files series of books by Jim Butcher. Thoroughly enjoying it. Really like Bob. I think Bob is my favorite character so far.
Bob the Skull.
Bob the Skull, man. A lot of fun.
It would figure. He's sort of a pervert.
Chicks.
He's sort of a wise-ass pervert.
I just like his level of experience, and chicks like chocolate, man. That's been my favorite quote so far.
It's been a while since I've read that one.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through. Really looking forward to finishing it. I thought I was going to finish tonight, before this podcast, before this recording, if it weren't for this fucking wasp, an actual bug.
Yes, not a
in
white
Anglo-Saxon person or Protestant. Yeah. Thoroughly enjoying it. Looking forward to the next one. I have my predictions about how it ends, so I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
It has a lot of good themes, a lot of things to be prepared for. If you continue the series, there is going to be... The next two books are a little bumpy. The next book, interesting. Summer Night, I believe, is the next book. Then the one after that's really hard for a lot of people to get through. But
parts of the dialogue remind me of you a lot, Brian.
Probably why I was attracted to the series. Dresden does have this sort of flippant attitude that I can relate to.
It's not so much the attitude. It's more just the words. Like he says, at one point he says, like, sheesh, okay, I'll do whatever. I don't remember what the context was, but I was like, oh, that's Brian all day. Like, that is something Brian would say, specifically.
Well, it's not really a spoiler, but they start getting into a lot of referential thing. It's something that's come into pop culture. What do you think of that, Bill? A lot of series, like one of my favorite, uses like nerd culture to sort of be relatable to a lot of their readers. Like Ready Player One.
I don't know. It can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes it's good, helps people relate. Other times it feels shoehorned in. So it just depends.
Like Mike, you should like Dresden. I don't know if it's come up, but he loves Star Wars.
Oh, it hasn't come up yet. I like that he's... Now, sometimes he says, I'm being a smartass, but I really didn't find his comments very smartass.
Yeah,
so I think that's...
He's a little weak in the beginning. As I said, the first book sets a decent tone, but he's definitely a weaker character in the beginning and grows.
It's more of an author problem than I think a character problem.
Yeah, you're probably right. The character does grow. He was super weak in the original novello story or short story. It was just a quick little cute thing that brought Dresden and Karen together. And funny enough, in the TV series, I find it funny how they switched the romantic interest and the Karen's character, the cop character. Like the romantic interest, this might be a spoiler, even for you, Mike, but
oh yeah,
he's dating a sort of a Hispanic
Susan
chick. Yeah,
Susan Rodriguez.
Yep, and Karen's the short little blonde. In the TV show, for some weird reason, they swapped. The cop was Hispanic, and the girlfriend was the blonde. So
that's lame.
And he had a hockey stick instead of a staff. The show was just headed towards disaster.
Oh, so do Susan and Harry... I guess spoilers. Because I'm at the point... the last thing I read last night was... Because I was cringing, and it was 12:30, but I was like... I gotta stop reading because I gotta go to bed. But he was forgetting that he had a date with her, with Susan.
Well, things happen.
Let's talk about something else.
Things happen. That's about all I'll tell you.
La 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 la.
That's it. That's all.
Cover my headphones like it's gonna.
I was laughing at that. Actually,
and major spoiler.
Why are you covering your
things
headphones?
might happen with Karen also, but not anytime soon, Mike.
Mike just throws his headphones across the room.
I thought about it actually. I did think about it.
I didn't say good things would happen with her.
What other modern fantasies are we going to talk about?
Bill, recently I was reading on your recommendation. I believe it's The Lost Gate by Orson Scott Card. Only one book in. Got through it.
What'd you think?
Pretty good. I'll rate it as my above average rating. a 7 or 8. It doesn't have quite the spark for me personally that things like the Dresden Files does or the Bobaverse. Good. See, I'm really critical of
Like eye
writing.
roll, right?
It's about a relatability thing. As Mike said, I sort
It's
of
not
have
anime
a
enough for you.
similar. I have a similar attitude to Dresden, and I'm sure if either one of you read the Bobaverse, you would see a part of me within the character Bob. I'm neither as powerful as Dresden or as smart as Bob, but I need relatability to keep sort of.
We know
See,
you're an egomaniac. We get it.
okay, yes.
Well, that's why they say that Keanu Reeves is the perfect frontman, because he's so vanilla and such a canvas that the viewer makes them the surrogate for the story very easily.
I
You
think
can
he's become
transpose
too
yourself
cool
onto.
recently. Some people would have trouble with Keanu Reeves. In the beginning, I will agree. He was a blank slate, but he's become like a national icon now. Sort of.
Through his good deeds and
Yeah.
His
That's
general attitude. No one hates him. I mean, even Johnny Depp has some problems with his shit, but let's not go down that rabbit hole. And Orson Scott Card really loves his childhood prodigy. Usually he builds them correctly, like there's always a reason. Ender, he was a prodigy because two genius children, they are two genius parents who already had two really intelligent children. And in the Lost Gates case, they thoroughly explain why. Oh, I'm forgetting his name. I just read this. Danny?
And now I'm forgetting his name. But it's been a while since I read it, actually.
I believe it's Daniel Thorogood Marshall. That's his full
Definitely
name.
not. I remember the name they came from was the North. I think it was Danny North. Something with a D. But yeah, they always establish it well. It always is weird to see the children talk like adults, but yet still act like a child.
It's Danny. Yeah.
Okay. I did not misremember that. But yeah, it's always weird. A little weird in the Orson Scott Card when he has child characters. I mean, even other books I've read by him, such as some other weird science fiction / fantasy series. Same thing. Super intelligent main child protagonist.
Do you think that's how Orson Scott Card sees himself? I wonder that about Stephen King sometimes. If some of his stuff is him living out, yeah, or at least how he wishes his childhood was. You know.
I think it's just a natural from his theater days. I believe he likes to build the character from the ground up, from childhood to go on. And adage as a writer, write about the most interesting part of your character's life. And I think he thinks, at least for the stories that he established, not all his stories star children. I don't want to bring that. A lot of them are youngish. You probably read more Orson Scott Card than me. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, a lot of his characters are young. I mean, even with the Enders series, though, I mean, they're children in a couple of them, but not throughout. So he has the ability to write, both adults and children. So it's not like he is stuck in that young adult
He
phase
just does
or whatever,
a lot
but
of series, and he definitely
He does.
deals with the children a lot more adult-like compared to J.K. Rowling or even the Golden Compass. Pullman.
which is something I kind of enjoy. I mean, I don't know, because you're able to, whether you're a kid or young adult or as an adult, you're able to read his books and in some way relate, and it doesn't feel like he's, as an author, talking down to children. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah, and you
a
can
lot of
and a lot of the typical hijinks where you're like with the adult, why are they that stupid when they're that smart? As a child, that comes across as a little bit more believable when they just like impulsive, trying to peer pressure. It makes for more plot convenience. Also, his Dark Material, I didn't actually read it, but the MacGuffin of the Golden Compass telling them everywhere, that bothered me as some parts. But I've probably been watching too much critical YouTubers, and some of them are overcritical. Oh, God. Everything
Probably
wrong.
so.
Everything wrong with The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi, told in like 10-hour chunks. I'm like, really? People are that critical? Even someone did like a 2-hour critique of Persona 5. I'm like, what the hell's the nitpicks? How does this have an audience?
Brian's like, oh no, they didn't.
It's not about the fact that they critiqued it, the fact they spent hours and hours on it.
That's what sells, man. That's another thing where we have no one to blame but ourselves. Because if people weren't watching that and getting some validation out of, oh, well, yeah, actually, and,
yeah, sorry for getting us off on that tangent, but just thinking about...
You got me off, baby.
It's also a byproduct of the way everything's been geared toward mass market to a ridiculous degree, though.
Yeah.
Because they plug in these formulas in Hollywood and try to pump out these movies and whatever that they think follow some sort of formula, and either the source material or the writing or whatever suffers, and they don't care as long as they make their box office number that they're looking for. So it's also kind of, a lot of people get angry at that, and people who are, fans of a certain series or a certain, I don't know, like, set of books or whatever, get upset and feel the need to rage about it.
Yes. And I'm sorry for that sort of tangent from our Lost Gate discussion. I mean, overall, that was a general overview. I think the establish of the powers is pretty cool. It would make a good concept in theory in video games, the sort of magic system. The afterwards Orson Scott Card had on this, how old the magic system, despite how new the book is, was quite interesting. And the fact of how they merged old lore. I really sort of have a hard-on for where they have modern fantasy. Like Dresden does the same as it goes on. A lot of their magic system, or at least the magical world that they live in, explains a lot of the myths of mankind.
Yeah, I've always liked that myself. That's why I recommended it, yeah.
Another reason to get into Dresden, but you'll have to wait until at least the second book before that starts coming to light.
Yeah, my biggest problem with The Lost Gate was it was just a little slow moving. There's a little too much filler for me.
Yeah, a lot of melandrian, a lot of character. I really didn't like his friend in the beginning. Sort of a douchebag, but he was meant to be that way. A lot of douchebags. If you live
that like vagabond lifestyle, I feel like you run into that type of person one way or another. I mean,
it's realistic, and I like the fact that Orson Scott Card doesn't take really moralistic choices, like both Ender's Game and this book. I mean, he does have a clear-cut core morals, but certain extents, like, the questionable things they do in that. Mm-hmm. You need to do certain things to survive in certain positions. Mm-hmm. And despite him being a Mormon, he incorporates the fact that people need to do that sort of shit sometimes in life to survive.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that the other day, the blend of religion and that sci-fi aspect. We were talking about Signs, and I put on Signs while I was doing some work over the weekend, and that was a mistake because I was like captivated by the movie, and I really didn't want to work. So, like, talk more around that, maybe.
What about
that blend of religion mixed with that sci-fi fantasy kind of environment? How that plays into... That's interesting. So he's a Mormon, and he has to do some things that maybe...
No.
I'm assuming
Orson
go against
Scott
his...
Card is a Mormon, and it's a deeply religious faith.
Oh, maybe there's a Neil Gaiman book then.
Yes, Neil...
Okay.
Neil Gaiman has In American Gods, he has the gods of old sort of dying and sort of the new age in the story. Like the internet, the television has gods represented in them. In reality, well, I shouldn't spoil it. Are you either one of you guys are gonna read it?
Just light spoilers. Don't go
yeah.
heavy.
I'm just talking about the theme. The theme is almost a con movie in a way. It's a battle. It's a very interesting.
Duping the gods.
Yeah, duping the gods.
That's
but
kind of cool.
I would have to get into details, but it's not that simple. There's a certain con aspect to it, along with sort of a battle for faith of the people. And that runs throughout it. I don't think it really comes up in The Lost Gate. I mean, the gods definitely. It's a new take. It's definitely an original take on the gods of old in the series. Did you want to expand on that, Bill? Of what you thought, how they did that?
Well, like you said, I've always kind of enjoyed that sort of mixing of mythology and fantasy sci-fi in the modern world. I mean, I liked we talked the Will Smith movie Bright for the kind of the same reasons, that kind of thing. And there's been a few other films, but it's hard without getting into like deep spoilers of the book. But I do like the way they mix Norse mythology into like the modern world, and how it's like this old world magic that's kind of being rediscovered. And Orson Scott Card usually does a pretty good job of, if you've read his books, he usually has two almost completely disparate storylines going on in usually in the beginning of his books. And then they, about midway through, slowly start to intertwine. And I think he does a good job of doing that with The Lost Gate, with kind of the old mythology and the new character that is kind of the main character that he's writing about. So, I mean, I don't want to get into like major spoilers, because there's stuff that, if anybody's interested in reading the book or moving forward, that you'd be like, whoa, holy mackerel. So I don't want to kind of give those sort of things up. But he does do a good job of kind of like intertwining the two.
Yeah, they definitely do get heavy into the Norse mythology. Minor spoiler, Loki is sort of a trickster. And there's a lot of applications to that, even in the book. It's really twisted. And I sort of like that.
You said
twist.
Loki, my like heart jumped. I was like, oh my God, Brian, you're going to give up like something major. But you did.
Minor spoiler.
Well, that's North mythology 101, though.
It is. But if you read the book, there's like, he was definitely in a minefield once he said the word Loki. Yeah.
But
that was almost more of a spoiler than.
I'm playing a little bit of a trickster. I almost get Bill like little Joel. Like he's gonna ruin the book for anyone. No, I'm going to try to avoid that this time. I already let loose with the Joel thing.
I mean, Marvel aside, anyone that's read any scrap of Norse mythology loved Loki, just for the...
We all wear masks, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, they insert that man in anywhere they go.
His Dark
Good
Materials mixes the religion, sci-fi, and fantasy pretty well, too.
Even going 4 episodes in, I could see the parallels with the Catholic Church, which I read about. I'm like, really? Wow. They really are going dark.
You want to expand on that?
Again, like, it's very difficult without giving away major spoilers. But in The Golden Compass, I think most people either watched the HBO series, his Dark Materials, or have watched the movie Golden Compass, or read the first book because it's most popular. It's been, publicized the most.
25 years, probably, if I'm right.
Huh?
It's been on print for 25 years.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And
I wonder
that
if
one deals with... Go ahead.
I was wondering if the armored bear was sort of like polar opposite, pardon the pun, off of the line of Narnia. I see a reflection of Narnia in the Golden Compass, but I don't know how they proceed. I'm not saying it's anywhat similar, but it definitely
Chronicles of Narnia kind of Yeah, they mix the religion and fantasy too. It's just not in like a more modern setting or whatever.
Yes, but I'm wondering if the Golden Compass was almost a reaction. Because as a writer, as someone who was aspired to write off of what I considered a decent story, but didn't take the steps it needed to, I was wondering if the Golden Compass was almost a reaction to Narnia. And I could see that happening. Similar magic systems.
Maybe. I mean, again, spoiler alert. Like I said, the Golden Compass they bring the church into it quite a bit, like because the churches and control the colleges and a bunch of other stuff. So if I don't again want to spoil too much in that, but it's heavily influenced in the story, but it goes much further into religion in the second two books. So as part of his Dark Materials is a 3-book series. Once it gets into the second and third book, religion becomes a huge part of it. So it's goes a lot deeper into that vein.
And major spoiler for Narnia, the lion is a allegory or some sort of analog for Jesus. Sorry, boys and girls. Sorry.
What was his name? Azrael? Was it?
Something. I was never a big Narnia person. I liked the idea, but the movie was sort of boring, and the book wasn't really worth the time after the movie.
I think I got as far as Prince Caspian in the book
I didn't
series. I didn't watch the movies.
Yeah, I didn't read the books.
I watched the first movie, then Prince Caspian, and I'm like, this is like a Return to Oz sort of thing. They go back, and like 200 years has passed. Cool in concept, but in execution, no. The first movie was good.
That was one of those ones, like my mom read my sister Anne of Green Gables when we were kids, and she read me Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I know that The Hobbit is one that was meant to be read to children, right, by their parents or whatever. Mm-hmm. Never got that. But, God, where was I going with this? Oh, yeah, so, I don't know. When the movies came out, I was not, and I saw how CG'd they were. I had no interest at all.
Understand. It was CG at a very difficult time. Talking about CG actually done right, that's probably what actually propelled Harry Potter to popularness. They were actually
CG?
well done. They were well done.
The first one was pretty bad. Does not.
It didn't look good.
No,
yeah,
it does not hold up well. For the time, it was probably all right.
That's what I'm
saying. But now it just looks like you're looking at some sort of clip from a Nintendo 64 game.
That was just the cherry on the top of the franchise, because everyone was reading the books at that point.
Yeah,
everyone that wanted to was. It was already an international phenomenon.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
The movies just cemented the fame. Because there was some problems with the books. I mean, with the movies. I hear the adaptation of the movies. People were like, the book is better. The biggest
problem is that they weren't long enough. Yeah. It's just, I mean, they should have at least made extended versions. Like, because if the first and second one you can kind of get away with because they are meant for children, But again, as the books scale, and the characters get older, the readers get older, the books become longer, more complicated. They should have made some extended editions at the very least, and started making the movies a little longer. I mean, the last one was split into two, part 1 and part 2, which it definitely needed to be. But I don't know, long before that, they should have been making the movies a little bit longer and putting more detail in them.
That might fit into your earlier point about how it's almost a case study of you already had a pretty solid 4-act series in the Sorcerer's Stone, and trying to adapt that to a more streamlined 3-act movie. Mm-hmm. You lose a lot in translation in terms of the beats and whatnot. I don't know. I've never read the books, and I don't think I've ever actually seen Sorcerer's Stone, the movie. I came in very late in the movie series. I've still never read one book. Dumbledore dies, by the way.
You didn't preface that with spoilers.
I mean, everyone that cares.
How dare you?
No one watches this, first of all. Second of all, everyone that cares already knows. Hi, Dave. Hey, buddy. Hey, future Mike. When I watch this for fucking to make sure I look good.
Since we're talking about all these excellent modern fantasy, how do you think they do overall? The blend of modern day with fantasy. I mean, there isn't a lot out that's really phenomenal. Even Dresden's about the only example, probably not the only example, that has sort of that duality of the modern and the fantasy together. His Dark Material is a separate magical world, and I'm assuming whenever they come to our world, that they hide it a little bit from the series because of the
So
secret
yeah, I know
order.
you had like a question about it being modern, but if you look at even the Golden Compass, they use a lot of technology. It's just different because they're supposed to be in like a different. Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! It's like a dimensional thing.
Yeah, I can tell
So
that from the
right,
series. The
okay.
one
So
dude
just in
crosses
case
over to
anybody
our
is like,
world.
whoa, but yeah, so it's a dimensional thing, and in their dimension, like there is technology. I mean, they have obviously like the airships, and they have the
Boats.
yeah, and there's other like electronic equipment that comes into it and that kind of stuff. So there's technology. So I think that kind of brings it out of the whole like swords and wizards, typical fantasy, setting.
They have
Um,
guns. I don't
yeah,
know if they have
exactly.
them
They
in the
have guns
books.
too. Yeah, so I think that's part of it. But then, again, spoiler alert: as you move into the second and third book, they eventually move into what I would assume is implied as our dimension. Like, you know, and there's modern day, there's computers, there's cars, there's that kind of stuff. So they do link that to the modern day, like in our dimension.
Yeah, I understand that, but there's sort of a separation between state and church, so to speak. Very apt for uh, his Dark Materials. I still can't. That's a horrible name for a series. Tells you almost nothing about it. But that aside, Dresden, American Gods sort of blend. Like you see what these supernatural beings are doing in the modern world and why some people don't know about them. In the
Mhm.
Dresden files, people are just ignorant. So it's
Oh,
sort of
okay.
like the real world. People see magic and they discount it as a hallucination or someone's crazy. There's one character who has a supernatural. There's a character who like says there's something wrong with these dead bodies, and he gets sent to a psych ward. Okay, even though there's a whole division who sort of studies this under the books, and they
I feel
they
like this, like, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, in American Gods, the gods are dwindling in power, so they only have minor powers. Because I think the way that's set up is they're powered by faith, and when they Zeus doesn't really have any many believers anymore, so he doesn't have that extra juice. Same for all the other gods.
It's like
In a way,
Tinkerbell
they
got to
kind of
clap.
yeah, or even like the Divine Comedy, right? Dante's The Inferno. You get into purgatory by people praying for you. It's kind of the same thing. People's prayers boost you up. I
Yeah,
don't
the
know.
power of
That's what it
faith.
made me think of. Yeah, the power of faith. Absolutely.
That series we're talking about, Supernatural, that has faith seems to have the problem I had with Supernatural was the demons, the rules with the demons' possession. I never really liked that the fact they could almost possess anyone. But that's a aside. But since we're outside of the top 10, any other modern fantasy that we want to talk about that isn't book wise that we talked about?
I mean, as a genre, I think it's been growing in popularity for a while now. When you look at it,
Supernatural.
like there's other stuff like kind of made me think of it when you're talking about like stuff being hidden, like Hellboy. It's kind of the same thing. Brings a lot of that mythical stuff, and then but it's for some reason, it still remains hidden.
Yeah,
'cause
Spawn
that's
is a good example of
yeah,
that.
and that's another one. Um, and that might be where it kind of stems from, is like the comic book thing, mixing a lot of that stuff into modern era.
Modern
There's been a
zeitgeist.
lot of like recently too, like Lock and Key was pretty popular, and that Warrior Nun series is pretty popular now. And then there was
There's also general fantasy, which has been popular. All the Lord of the Rings movies, The
yeah,
Witcher, video games, World of Warcraft. I mean,
Well,
and
that's
you,
not
yeah.
modern
it's
fantasy.
not
I was gonna
modern
That's
say that's
strictly
kind of
fantasy,
been
fantasy.
around for
but there's sort of a
long
fantasy.
time.
Modern fantasy is more the self insert. When you have modern characters, you can insert yourself better into the fantasy world. That's what I'm going to. The fantasy transplants into people you can see your friends as you are. I'm just shooting
Well,
shit out,
that's
but
yeah. Then
it goes in the
that's
vein.
way too vague. That's way too vague because you can apply that to. I mean, we could all be archetypes if we pick and choose which aspects of ourselves fit into a certain character model, right? But then, like, so I was thinking about Wolfenstein, the latest Wolfenstein game where the Nazis won, right? And it was supposed to be today, but in a world where Germany ended up taking over the United States. Is that a modern fantasy? I mean, not that I fantasize about Nazis taking over the United States, but
That's alternate history.
that's set in modern times. But that's like there's a I don't know. I feel like in my mind, and I know we kind of dismissed cyberpunk stuff in the top 10, but there's a cross there of modern fantasy as we know it, because I can't go to the fucking classifieds and find a wizard. You know what I mean? So it's
Well, you brought up 50 Shades of Grey as an example, just probably as a joke,
as a
but
joke, absolutely. Shout
fantasy
out Icy.
refers to more generally the magic system. There needs to be a supernatural element. You can explain it with logic. In fact, Dresden Files does that rather well. They're soft and
Logic.
hot. It has rules to it. Harry Potter has a very soft magic system. Even Dresden Files is rather loose with it. There's a lot harder magic systems out there.
My man had a fucking sliver of sunlight in a handkerchief.
Yeah. Reminded me a lot of Supernatural.
That's almost science fiction, is all I'm saying. Like, I've been playing Shadowrunner, right? And I have mages on call. They can do wizardy things. How is that not a modern fan? That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
I understand. A lot of science fiction gets into almost the super science fantasy realm, but there's still a distinction. They generally at least do pseudoscience. It's nothing wrong with asking the question, what's the difference between something like Man in the High Tower, alternate like Wolfenstein, where basically the Germans and the Japan split America between themselves. They're sort of like a neutral zone, buffer zone where remnants of the U.S. still kick along and squalor. There's a lot of things that explore alternate history. You could consider that your own separate genre. There's also isekai. That's actually becoming more popular in novels from what I see. Basically, people in the modern world either getting sent back, typically getting sent back to a fantasy world. There's a lot of books out there. I got recommended one. It was called Dungeon Lord. Basically, someone from a fantasy world created a video game on our planet. And they basically made the video game, had people from our world control like indestructible, practically indestructible golems to like just wipe out all the evil. The church over there got these people from our world, RPG players, to wipe out the evil of their world. I mean, there's a lot of applications within the fantasy and science fiction genre.
Okay.
And the division between fantasy and sci-fi can be loose or hard.
It's thin, yeah, my opinion.
I mean, there are some like bring up Orson Scott Card. I mean, his if you actually read the books, I don't know if they explained it in the movie, but time travel actually follows the rules of relativity in that.
Hmm.
They do the same in Bobaverse. Both series have a lot of crossover. They have
Interstellar.
it has scientific concepts which
A lot of
are
relativity, yeah.
they get into this some weird time paradox thing that would that be supported by science? That'd be interesting to look up.
Interstellar. You talking
Yeah,
about?
Yeah.
where he goes back in time and sort of whispers a message, I think, when he's in that time vortex
Well, maybe that's where it crosses.
into the fantasy realm. But
Mm,
there could be.
But the relativity of time moving slower if gravity's more intense
Yes,
and things like
but
that.
going
Yeah.
backwards, I think, is the weird thing.
I mean, if you're talking about, the space time being curved, nonlinear,
Okay, yeah.
time theories, string theory, not really that far out of the realm of possibility, depending on what theoretical framework of the universe you're talking about.
Technically, his dark
Well, they-
material could be science fiction. Their magic system could just be their sort of science.
Could be.
Their soul breaks off and forms into another creature. They could have bigger souls if you want to, but soul isn't really a science. Generally, science fiction strays away from souls.
Not yet. I think there's going to come a time where our particular string of jellyfish electrical responses could be considered. We just don't get it yet. I think is the thing with souls.
Okay, you believe in reincarnation, Mike?
No, I didn't say that. I think which I haven't really thought too much about reincarnation, but on the whole, I don't know, something's keeping this immortal engine running. I don't know.
Well, I've
Immortal
always
engine.
I
You know
have
what
a
I'm saying.
series about I have a few series or at least ideas. I have a short story about an afterlife that follows the rules of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be destroyed or created. If you consider soul a sort of energy matrix, it couldn't be destroyed, and you would always have a loss of principle. So I sort of had offshoots of souls sort of combined into one soul. That's still fantasy and not science fiction, but I applied the laws of thermodynamics for this concept to the soul. I'm sure we're going to see more of that. I'm sure there's plenty out there. Can't name any off the top of my hands. I mean, the guy who did I Am Legend had What Dreams May Become. If you ever saw that horrible, I liked it, but a lot of people panned What Dreams May Become with Robin Williams because it was a serious movie with Robin Williams.
Was Don Cheadle in there? Was he his buddy?
I think Cuban Gooding Jr. was in that movie.
Is that who it was?
Yeah, he played
Okay.
his son. It was a weird thing. I think he took the form of a black guy because he really admired the black guy, but he was Robin Williams' son. Forget how they explained that away. It's been a while since I watched.
Maybe Robin Williams was black and the black guy really admired a white guy. But I see what you're saying. That's interesting.
No, they showed Robin Williams' character while he was alive.
From his point of view.
Okay, you're going rather meta, but yeah.
I don't know. I never saw it. I'm just
Oh,
fucking around.
I should have said spoilers for anyone who hasn't watched What Dreams May Become. But
For that
interested in
25-year-old
it.
movie?
Yeah, so many spoilers getting leaked out because we assumed people who wanted to watch it would watch it.
This is something we should talk about on a separate podcast, but spoiler warning was like a big deal when Game of Thrones was going on, but it's kind of become a meme now because I've noticed a lot of people will say the spoiler and then say spoiler warning in my YouTube escapades.
Oh, okay.
No one cares anymore, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I meant with some currently running things that came out just a few days ago,
Sure.
I really think that should be included. But for things like there was a joke in Red vs. Blue about loss. Someone's like, that's sort of bullshit, like how they were all dead and in purgatory. Dude, spoilers? Be like,
I'm gonna go back and watch that from 20 years ago.
No, it was
there's definitely like a grace period.
Red vs. Blue
and then
was
after
like
that, yeah.
Red vs. Blue was set like 200 years in the future because it was a parody off of Halo.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
bringing up
Oh, I got you. That's funny. Yeah. In the context of it's
200 years
Yeah.
in the future.
in character in Halo. Yeah.